I was going to say this at the end, I'll say it at the end again. As you walk to the left, as you leave the church, there is a table with information about the league. If you're not a member, we welcome you to invite you to be a member. There are forms and there are brochures out there. And you'll notice a framed certificate. We're proud of that. It's gold. It's on a little stand, and it's recognition from the Alameda County Board of Supervisors, acknowledging our local League of Women Voters, Fremont, Newark, and Union City. And we proudly received it at a meeting at their local in Oakland, and to receive it. And so please read it. It's very nice. It's in regards to the National Women's History Month, but it was also acknowledging all the work that we did in the past few years. And so we want to express and share that with you folks. So the one thing I want to thank everyone for being here. The League of Women Voters is a grassroots organization. We're nonprofit and more so nonpartisan. And we encourage our members and in our communities to be informed on issues that impact our daily lives. And for over 60 years, this league, the League of Women Voters of Fremont, Newark, and Union City, have volunteered many hours to defend our democracy, and that is the status right now, defending our democracy. Our Constitution is in a crisis. So we have, in 2024, proudly to say that we conducted registration events for youth and adults, coordinated candidate forums, and educated our voters by way of pros and cons and presentations at various venues. And this past 2024 election, we are proud of our publication, our voter information booklet that was sent to over 119 households in our 3 cities. And that deserves a round of applause to our members. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And now we'll turn it over so that we can begin our presentation. Jane, please.
Thanks. So homelessness is not a solitary social issue. It's a manifestation of systemic weaknesses in many areas that the League of Women Voters has either studied already or intends to study. Areas such as domestic violence, youth aging out of foster care, income inequality, substance abuse, PTSD that goes untreated, particularly among veterans, identity theft, mental and physical health care weaknesses in the system, systemic racism, sexism, soaring housing costs. You can add lots more in your mind, but the League of Women Voters puts that into their nonpartisan but political category. We have a mission to study issues, develop consensus on policy, and then take action. So this is all of these different issues are within our purview. But if homelessness is a consequence, how do we address it? Well, I would like to introduce to you Vivian Wan, who is the new CEO of Abode Services. She succeeded Louis Shequin, who retired last month. Vivian is a new CEO, but she is not new to Abode. She's been there for 17 years, and her role has grown as the agency has grown. There are people in this room that will remember the beginning of Tri-City Homeless Coalition, as it was known then. It was a coalition of, and a couple of them raised their hands too. There's another one, Judy. It was a coalition of area churches that gathered together to figure out how to shelter people during the cold months of the year. Well, now it has grown to be the leading agency in the Bay Area providing sustainable solutions in 7 Bay Area counties to more than 15,000 people each year. So Vivian will tell you much more about that, and it is my pleasure to introduce Vivian Wan.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much, Jane, and for the League for having me today. And I just wanted to give a little precursor. I'm going to talk a little bit about Abode, but mostly I'm just going to talk about homelessness and housing. So there's lots of opportunities if you want to learn more about Abode. We have a little table out there. You can volunteer, you can donate, you can do all those things. But really, I'm coming to talk more globally about homelessness. And at Abode, we really believe that it is our duty to serve everyone who's homeless, but also to everyone that we're already serving, but also to be aware of all the people we can't get to. So really, anyone who has a housing crisis or who is homeless, whether they're one of our clients or not, we care about them and we think they deserve a home. And so that's what this is going to be about. And there will be opportunities to ask questions at the end. If you get sick of hearing my voice, maybe I'll take a question in between, but we'll see. This is what we're going to talk about today. So a little bit about Abode's work. I swear that's going to be the quickest part. I'm going to give a very short history of homelessness, talk about what homelessness looks like today, talk about the myths and facts and some connections around homelessness, because it's a league and because it's what I care about, a call to action, what we can do as citizens to solve this issue. And then give you some resources, because I'm going to try to wrap up everything about homelessness in like 1 hour, and that's not going to be enough. So I'm giving you resources if you want to learn more. So a little bit about Abode. So we are actually 3 different organizations, and we believe in a sort of holistic model. We build housing, we do property management within housing, and then the biggest part of Abode and what you hear about it is Abode Services, is providing services to people, whether they're on the streets, in shelters, or in housing. So altogether, we're about 800 staff members now. And, you know, things change all the time, Jane. Now we're 8 counties. Can't keep up. New news. And we serve, of course, the Fremont area. We serve small counties, large counties, mid-sized counties, and the intervention for those counties all look a little bit different. So we cater our programs to the counties that we're in. We have all sorts of different programs, as you know, because all of it is here in Fremont. Can y'all hear me okay? All right. They're all here in Fremont. We have outreach, we have shelter, we have interim housing. We have what is called rapid rehousing. That basically means it's a shorter term subsidy that we help people with their rent for 6 months, a year, 2 years, but ultimately they take over the rent themselves. And then we have permanent housing, both in buildings, some that we build and manage ourselves, others that we don't, and also just in scattered site apartments. We work with over 1,400 landlords, property managers, owners in the communities we serve. And then the site-based housing is what we talk a lot about here. We have a grand opening coming up in a couple of weeks. I don't know if the League knows, but this is Affordable Housing Month, so it's great that I'm here today, but we'll be kicking off Affordable Housing Month with that grand opening at Fremont Family, which incidentally is about a mile away from my house, so I'm really proud about that building. So since July of 2020, we have housed nearly 13,000 people. So these are non-duplicated folks. These are folks that were homeless, and now they are permanently housed. And the success rate for staying in housing is phenomenal. For permanent supportive housing, it's 94 to 96%. So this is the permanent side. For that rapid rehousing, the short-term subsidy, that is a lower percentage. So it ranges from the program from 73% all the way up to 85%. So remarkably, once people get housed, they stay housed. Our housing also comes with supportive services. Many people get confused about that they think folks, when we say housing first, that we just throw people in housing. I was talking to a gentleman before this talk, but it's really housing with supportive services catered to their needs. Because let me be clear, most people just need more income or cheaper housing. That's why most people experience homelessness. They just can't afford to live here in the Bay Area. But about 30% do need really intensive services to help them sustain housing, find housing, and sustain it. And on any given night, we made sure that 8,600 people slept in a home rather than on a street. So that's sort of our nightly census in housing, not including our outreach work, not including our shelter work, just in real housing where they have their own bed, their own door that they can close and lock, and have the dignity of a home. Last Abode slide just gives you a broad, if you want to know the 8 counties, here they are. The only counties in the Bay that we're not currently in is Marin and Contra Costa, but we are everywhere else. Last year we served nearly 17,000 people, and a lot of those were adults and a lot of them were children. We forget, I don't forget, you probably don't forget, but a lot of families experience homelessness too, particularly here in Fremont, a lot of families in their vehicles, and about 11,000 households. All right. And what do we do, really? And you'll see the top of this page says housing ends homelessness. So I'm going to talk a lot today, and if you leave with nothing else, leave with that. And in every talk that I give, I make people say it 100 times. I'm not going to make you say it, but housing ends homelessness. We need to remember that. Nothing else. We can't serve people out of homelessness. We can't jail people out of homelessness. We can't do anything without housing. By nature, once you move into housing, you're no longer homeless, right? So that ends homelessness. And I'll get to it in a minute, but housing is also the cause of homelessness. But how we do that, we build housing, we do property management, we do housing services. That's what we call when we work with landlords, because there's sometimes a debate in our community of like, well, do we produce more? Like we can't, you often hear, has anyone heard we can't build our way out of homelessness? Anyone hear that? Yeah, Iris has heard it. I saw her shake her head. But yes, yes, we can. First of all, we need more housing in this community, but we also need to take advantage of the housing that we already have. In the Bay Area, it's estimated that about 10% of rental units are vacant at any point in time. 10%. Like what I could do with 10% of those units, if I could get them, to be housing for people who have experienced homelessness, that can make a huge dent. So we really believe in an and world, meaning we have to do this, we have to build, and we have to take advantage of the existing stock of housing to make sure that we are actually doing everything that we can. And then the top of that little, I call it a pyramid, but I guess it's not a pyramid, is the social services, really. Services catered to the individual, not cookie cutter services, because not everyone needs the same thing. Family might need support with subsidized childcare, or they might need support with looking for food pantries or other sort of supports so they don't have to spend their income on other things, because let's be real, in the Bay Area, you have to earn about $50 an hour to be able to afford a modest 2-bedroom apartment. Let that sink in for a minute, $50 an hour. So if you are a single earner household, think how hard that is. That's over $100,000 a year. If you're a double earner household, still, if you're on minimum wage, you're still not doing it. So you have to work like 3 minimum wage jobs or more to be able to afford a modest 2-bedroom apartment, if they will rent to you. So, so all of these things really play together. Abode's approach, and it's not only Abode's, until very recently, it was the federal government's approach, but it's housing first. And again, this does not mean housing only. It means that we don't actually make it harder for people experiencing hardship to jump through more hoops than we have to jump through to get into housing, meaning we don't require sobriety, we don't require them going through a treatment program, we don't require med compliance. We really believe that once you go into housing, we know through decades of evidence, hundreds of empirical studies, randomized controlled trials, study after study shows that it is more effective to put people in housing first and then provide the services they need. just think about it from a common sense perspective. If you are trying to get to treatment programs and you are trying to figure out where to take a shower, where to get food, where you can stay without the police sweeping your belongings, all of these things in the day-to-day, how do you try to get to your treatment program, right? You can't hold all of these things at once. If you have a home, which you can go close your door, which you can, charge your phone, then you can actually get to the services that you need in a more meaningful way. It's just common sense. So this is what we mean by housing first. And again, housing with services. And this next slide, please do not fixate on it. It's very, very small, so I'm sorry for that. But I warned you. But I just wanted to illustrate, just by the pure amount of words on that page, is that housing ends homelessness, but there is a system. You see some of the things I've mentioned already and the types of services we provide are on here. So housing development and prevention. Prevention means trying to get to people before they become homeless, right at that door, before they actually come into our system to help them sustain the rent. And then we have outreach and coordinated entry and interim housing and emergency shelter, rapid rehousing. So all of these are different types of care in the homeless system and ways to get people through the system. I can talk an entire 3 hours on any one of these things. I just want to let you know that they exist, and these are interventions that not only Abode, but the full system provides, that comes together to support people at the moment they need support. That's sort of a general Abode and sort of our methodology. I'm going to move into a little bit of the history of homelessness. Any history bucks here? All right, so if you ask the question, I'm going to make you come up here and answer it. There you go. So a lot of folks, when you think of why homelessness exists, this is an audience participation. What first comes to mind? I should have actually gone back. I'm not going to let you cheat here. What first comes to mind? Oh, insufficient. You're top of the class. That's not most people. Insufficient income. What comes to mind of why homelessness really, blossom is an awful word, increased dramatically? Unemployment, mental health. We hear a lot. So the thing. Oh, Iris, we didn't build. You guys, you're not giving me the answer that I expect here, which is what most people say. Most people point to the deinstitutionalization of the mental health system. Most people point to that, and I will get to that, and that is part of it. But that's not really where it began. So, because you did cheat a little bit, but aside from a brief period in the Great Depression, homelessness simply didn't occur in the United States with any ongoing large-scale manner until around the 1980s. So again, there was a brief period in the Great Depression, and then a lot of actually policy to get folks out, and then in the 80s. And this was really an account of four main things happening all at once. The first one here is job loss and wage stagnation. The U.S. economy shifted away from factory jobs, 30 million jobs between this period, directly with factories and indirectly, were lost. Wages fell for most workers, and basically workers had fewer jobs and less pay. So at this point in time, more Americans were losing their jobs and seeing significant decreases in what they were earning. So that's shift number one. So the job and wages. Someone said affordable housing. Yes, winner, winner. So the loss of affordable housing from 1970 to the 90s, low-wage renter households rose by 5 million folks. So there were 5 million more low-wage renters. And we lost 1 million affordable rentals. The federal housing support declined by 60% in this time, cutting programs like Section 8. So basically, there was less affordable housing and a growing number of low-income renters. This really impacted urban communities that had SROs, so single room occupancies, like New York, San Francisco, Seattle. And the federal budget plummeted from $80 billion to about $35 billion. So that's that 60% shift. I will note that the president's budget that came out yesterday had a 43% cut in HUD. So, you know, if you read history and look at history and see the observance of what happens when you actually decrease investment in housing, we can see a shift coming our way in the next 20 or 30 years that actually makes what we're going through now look like Disneyland, right? So you can really see what's coming if you disinvest in housing. So again, fewer and fewer low-income households could afford housing, and there was much less to go around. And I will say, at a personal note, this is what infuriates me when you, and I'll talk about a little bit of cost of housing, when you hear the media, the governor, everyone really lamenting over how many billions of dollars they've invested to end homelessness. But it's undoing decades and decades of disinvestment. So it's like putting little pennies in when millions and millions and millions of dollars have been disinvested over the last few decades. So it's incredibly frustrating to me. The third shift, the dissolution of the safety net system. So wages are dropping, fewer housings available, and why not actually decrease the safety net, the meager safety net that is there? So just as more people need help, the safety net was shrinking from the 70s to the 90s. AFDC, TANF, sort of the welfare payment, lost about half of the value. So many people without jobs or that had this as their only income couldn't survive anymore. It just wasn't enough. So the AFDC basically went from about $728 to a worth of $395 a month. What can you do with $395 a month, even back in the mid-90s? So this was the third huge shift, that while the welfare had never been particularly generous, it was shrinking to the point where it no longer served as a safety net. And still people that received welfare were saddled with this burden, with this image, with this, this welfare mom, mantra that you hear from politicians and media, and they were actually receiving $400 a month. And we see this happening again right now, of course. And then the fourth shift is what I started with, this deinstitutionalization. So the state mental health hospitals were shutting down, and it was meant to actually provide community care, because what people don't talk about is the horrid conditions in these state mental health hospitals. But the community care never really coalesced, was a problem. And this is really what linked mental health with homelessness forever in the public's mind, right? Because this shift did happen, but all of these other things, the wages, the housing, the safety net, and the institutionalization was happening. So sadly, for the post-institutional experience of homelessness, the traumas that folks experience were even greater, right? So these people living in institutions were now on the streets trying to get community care, but there was never enough money going into that community care system to support the people coming out of hospitals. So they became homeless, and that connection between mental health and homelessness sort of was cemented at that very moment. So the overview of the history of homelessness, and I always really like to talk about this because folks, forget history and they just think about what's happening now or this year or last year, and we know the political cycle is short, right? Everyone's trying to make their move while they're in office, but really this is decades in the making. So job loss, affordable housing loss, safety net dissolution, and then deinstitutionalization. All of this has gotten us to where we are here today. You guys gonna go home and cry? Is that, I've now depressed you all, and it's not gonna get better here. So where are we today? So nationwide, about 772 folks experiencing homelessness in the US, right? So really that looks like 23 out of every 10,000 people. Here in California, that number is 181,000, 47 people out of every 10,000, so about double the average. So the California represents about 12% of the US population, but about 30% of people who experience homelessness. That's a huge shift. And many people think it's because of the good weather. It's not because of the good weather. I'm guessing because you're a smart crew, you know what it's because of? Housing. So we're going to get there. So when people see someone experiencing homelessness, what they're doing is they're conflating two ideas all at once, right? They're saying, why are there so many people homeless in this area? And then sometimes there's judgment happening in all of our minds. Why did this person become homeless? And I'm going to talk a little bit about how those two things coexist, the structural factors of homelessness and the individual vulnerabilities that make some folks fall into homelessness more quickly and more pervasively than others. So these are the two things that whenever we're looking outside, I ask you to hold these both and think critically about how we got here. Too many clickers, too many pages here. All right, so structural factors we're going to go to first. So housing, wages, income inequality, racism, these are all structural factors. I don't know, can you see the writing on the dots? Sort of, no? Well, I think these slides can go out at some point, yeah? Can we show the slides? All right. So this is in 2024. The states with the most expensive rent tend to have higher rates of homelessness. So those of you who can see the very small blurry, the folks on the high end, you should see New York, DC, Hawaii, California is over on the right hand, meaning it's the most expensive place, but that's where the 47 people per 10,000 are sitting. So you will see the most expensive places to live have the highest rates of homelessness. New York is a little bit of an outlier, mainly because you see the rents aren't as far right as the others, but it's because it's a right to shelter state. So meaning that in New York, everyone who is homeless has a right to shelter. So their shelter system is immense. And a lot of their resources go into their shelter system and not into other systems, so people stay in homelessness. I'm not going to talk about New York, but basically that's why that's an outlier. But you see DC, Hawaii, and California are all on the right-hand side. So again, highest rates of homelessness, highest cost of livings. No big surprise there. So this one, again, is looking at more structural factors, and I can't even read it at this point. So the housing cost burden by income group, it basically is showing that dark bar on the left-hand side, is showing rent burden, and the one to the right is severe rent burden. So you'll see the higher, that the lower income folks, the extremely low income folks, have almost everyone's rent burden, and almost everyone is really rent burden. And rent burden in this case means you're paying over 30% of your income. Severe rent burden means over 50% of your income goes towards rent. So it is on that last one with the teeny tiny yellow is looking at, I think, 80 to 100% area median income. So folks that are sort of middle of the road, there's still rent burden there that more likely than not in the Bay Area, people are paying more than 30% of their income towards rent. And this is not just Bay Area, but in California. But really that severe rent burden is very low. So it just speaks to the fact that we actually need more housing at the extremely low income levels. And then the second one is affordable and available homes per 100 renters. So again, looking conversely, whenever we're building housing, and I'm looking at John here because he knows this in great detail, that there's always an encouragement to build at that high income level, meaning, there is a missing middle, folks. So people that are in the middle income, there's not enough housing. There's a whole supply and demand issue. And it is most severe at the extremely low income level. So if we're only building at that place where we have 83 for every 100 that need it, so there's still 17 folks that don't get it for every 100, still a problem. But when you look down there of 24, meaning at the extremely low income level, for every 100 people that need housing, only 24 have it. Guess who's falling into homelessness? It's those folks, right? And at the top, they might be coming down, right? But they're not falling into homelessness at the same rates as those extremely low income individuals. Questions so far? I'm going to stop talking, give myself a minute to breathe. I'll take a question. Is that allowed? Questions, comments, surprises? John, surprised that. The 1,400 landlords that we work with, is that what you're talking about? So not Section 8, those are subsidies that we manage. So Section 8, now it's called Housing Choice Vouchers. Those are vouchers that are administered by housing authorities. What we administer is typically other types of housing money from either HUD or from local governments, again, some of which is being proposed to be totally cut in this federal administration's budget. But no, that is just the ones that we work with, so not Section 8 vouchers. Absolutely. So if the cuts go through, and again, it just came out yesterday, there's a lot of fight to have. Then absolutely it's going to impact all of us, right? So in his budget, they cut completely home dollars, which is dollars that the city gets, the counties get, others get, and they use it for both prevention and for tenant-based rental assistance. CDBG, Community Development Block Grant money, also. The biggest housing subsidy program, like John says, is through the housing authorities. So if they have to reduce by 40%, that is going to put a lot of folks out on the streets, particularly a lot of folks who are just economically homeless, meaning that they just can't afford, they don't earn $50 an hour to pay rent. There's also things that he's proposing in the budget of only allowing a 2-year subsidy for able-bodied individuals. So I'd assume folks without disabilities and not older adults. However, it doesn't solve this gap between wages and rent, right, that we're all facing. So all of these folks are going to come out, and cities and counties and states are going to have to fill their holes in other ways. So it will absolutely impact our ability to provide services as money needs to be shifted around to play whack-a-mole, right, to fill the gaps. One more, and then I'm going to go on. Judy?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Sure.
Well, what you're presenting is too much for me to absorb on a good day. So what I want to ask is very basic. Would you make this slideshow available? Okay, so then the second thought is make it available to somebody in the league and have people contact us, and we'll do it for you, okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Because I'm sure that everybody is, to some extent, like me, they're sitting here thinking, oh my God, I just can't hold this in my
Absolutely. Thanks, Judy. So I'm going to keep going because we're going to get to sort of the what I think is a good part. This is when you say it's all good, Vivian. No. So we've talked a little bit about structural factors, which is really about housing costs. And I'm going to give you resources at the end to read more about that. Get structural factors here, more that, again, showing the same sort of thing. And this thing on the right is really interesting to me. According to the Government Affordability Office, any $100 increase in rents that we're seeing actually impacts homelessness by 9%. So you see this growing rents with growing homelessness. Wages aren't going up that high, so people get pushed out of the market. And then I won't talk about the chart that you can't see anyway. So you remember I said when we're looking at homelessness that folks are really conflating two different things. They're talking about, why are there so many people homeless here, and then why is this person homelessness? Now I'm going to talk about how these things interact. And my friend, colleague, Dr. Margot Gushel, she uses this example a lot, that housing and homelessness is a lot like musical chairs. Right? Y'all played musical chairs before? Your kids play musical chairs? I don't know if they do that anymore. But, essentially you turn on the music and like people walk around, and if there were enough chairs for everyone, eventually everyone sits down. Someone who's slower or was on their phone or had a broken leg, they might get to their chair late, but they'll get a chair. But what happens when you take a chair away? So back to that graph that you couldn't see that well, that showed that for every extremely low-income housing household, there were 24 units available for every 100 that needed them. So take away one chair, and then you have the same people like going and trying to get a chair, going around, the music's on, and the music stops. Who is not going to get that chair? Or if we're all paying attention, all on our games, all physically, mentally well, it's going to be a fight to the end, right? But if you have someone who's struggling with something, maybe they're caring for a child on the side and weren't listening. Maybe they have a broken leg. Maybe they're blind. Who knows? But then that individual vulnerability is going to connect with, do they get a chair? Do they get housing? Take away 2 chairs and have the same amount of people. Take away 3 chairs. So then you get into this sort of hyper Darwinism world of really only the folks who can survive, are getting chairs, and those with some of these individual vulnerabilities are falling by the wayside. So the less favorable the structural factors and availability of housing, chairs, impacts really the chairs and the safety net impacts how many individual vulnerabilities you have to achieve your goals, right? Does that make sense? You guys remember the musical chairs, if nothing else? Oh, this slide came out very weird. But so a few connections: older adults, growing population, and homelessness. So this chart actually shows that about 40% of adults who are homeless are over the age of 50. More recent, actually, data shows in California from the largest statewide survey on homelessness shows that about 48%. So you'll see this huge shift, right? And you can imagine why. Again, that vulnerability. And I'll send these, and there's a racial component to this. Black and brown Americans are falling into homelessness faster, including among our older adult populations, for a lot of historical and current reasons. 70% of our older adults have a disabling condition. Most have income, but not enough to actually afford housing. And the housing costs are the drivers. So over half of our adult renters in California face an affordability crisis. So even if they're not in homelessness, that the older adults in our communities are falling into homelessness faster. There's also a statistic, and I don't know if I added it here, that So 40, that of the 48% of folks who are homeless that are above 50, about half of those technically 40%, became homeless for the first time as an older adult. So these are not folks who have been struggling their whole lives. They are falling into homelessness as, as our older adult population. Many of you might take offense, as do I, about using 50 years old as that older adult category. But as you can imagine, that folks living on the streets, 50 looks like 70, right? So, we are really tracking, how our folks are coming into homelessness. Domestic violence. So intimate partner violence, so IPV, is a huge, has a huge connection to homelessness. Experience intimate partner violence places a person at risk of homelessness by disrupting everything in their lives. In the 6 months prior to homelessness, about 8% of folks, I'm talking about the largest statewide California survey. I'm going to give you the link at the end, that it showed that about 8% of folks experience intimate partner violence. If you look at just women, it's more than double, right? So folks are experiencing domestic violence before and after they become homeless at really large amounts. 40 indicated that violence was a reason for leaving their housing. So keep that in mind, as it all plays together, right? The $50 an hour that you have to earn to afford a unit, and then you're in a situation that is a domestic violence situation, and look, you no longer have $50 an hour in your household income. So it's not surprising that folks are falling into homelessness coming out of domestic violence or intimate partner violence situations. I'm speeding through a little bit now because I have 15 minutes left. Incarceration. So this is timely here in Fremont, but people who have been incarcerated are 13 times more likely to experience homeless. So we often hear that this idea that people on the streets are criminals and are dangerous. Well, we sort of make them criminals and dangerous, and then they there's this direct correlation of once you've been incarcerated, you're more likely to become homeless. So it's this weird circular conversation that we have. So people without a home are more likely to be jailed simply for existing, especially in places in California where it's easier to find, cite, and jail people who experience homelessness. And experiencing unsheltered homelessness increases people's interaction with the justice system. This thing on the left, this is the general public, that out of every 1,000, I believe, 10,000, thank you, that 21 people go into homelessness. Then if they are incarcerated once, 141, more than once, 279. So you see this idea that as people are incarcerated more. On the right-hand side, people experiencing unsheltered homelessness are more likely to interact with the justice system. No surprise. Unsheltered homelessness in California, about 75 to 80% of all people experiencing homelessness are unsheltered. So they're on the streets interacting with law enforcement. So you're on the streets interacting with law enforcement, you get fined, cited, land in jail at some point, and then it just increases the cycle of you staying homeless. There might be more questions about that later. 15? Oh, thank you. I brought mine. Thank you. So now I'm going to talk about some myths. So homeless is really about mental health, substance abuse, and treatment is the answer. Anyone hear that before? Right? So this is ever again since the deinstitutionalization. This is absolutely a myth. This is not to say that people experiencing homelessness many people experiencing homelessness do in fact have mental health challenges and substance abuse issues. not everyone, but I'm not going to lie to you and say that that's not true. But the thing that I actually talk about more is that many didn't have actually those issues before they became homeless. So there's a cause and effect, issue that no, they're not becoming homeless because they had mental health challenges. But I mean, just close your eyes for a minute and then imagine you just living outside for a day, trying to figure out where you're going to be. Are you going to be warm? Are you going to have food? Are you going to get attacked? Are you going to get jailed? All of these things. Where are you going to find your food? Where are you going to shower? It causes me anxiety just to think about it, right? Now I have that pervasive sense of vigilance, in your body for weeks, months, years. What does that do to you? We all know that our environment impacts our mental health. This is what happens as folks experience homelessness. In the same UCSF study, included 3,200 folks that they studied, 365 that they did in-depth interviews with, and found that 27% of people experiencing homelessness had a psychiatric hospitalization, but about half of those had it after they became homeless. Again, cause and effect. That it's not mental health that's causing the homelessness. 51% of the population expressed severe anxiety, 48% severe depression, 37% trouble concentrating, remembering. 38% said their symptoms worsened after they became homeless, and only 20% actually receive any services. So people are out in the streets exhibiting all of these severe mental health systems, and only 20% are getting services. So you will never hear me say that we don't need more mental health services, but what I will say is mental health is not the reason for homelessness. But we absolutely need both, and the same as substance abuse. So I put this other chart up here just as a case in point. And this actually comes from Colburn's book that I'll show you at the end. But in West Virginia, drug overdoses are about 57.8 per 100,000, but the homelessness is only 7.7 per 10,000. Is it 10,000 or 100,000? 10,000, thank you. I can't even see it. So, and then, but looking at California, drug overdoses are actually only 11.6, but look at the number of homelessness. So again, it's not the drugs, there's actually higher rates of drugs in places that have lower homelessness, that there are connected in that folks experiencing homelessness certainly are challenged with mental health issues, but it's not a direct correlation in any stretch of the imagination. And I will send these to you so you can look at them in more detail. Homelessness is a racial injustice issue. This is absolutely true, that homelessness is an issue, for a lot of reasons, but home ownership is the primary way in America that we build wealth, right? All of our systems are set up around home ownership. And racial covenants, segregated neighborhoods, redlining, redistricting, restricted access to mortgages, predatory lending, all legal behaviors at some point in our history. Again, the history buffs, know all of this, and there's some resources at the end. All of this has kept Black and brown communities out of our housing market and has impacted ability to build wealth. So we see more Black and brown community members homeless than is typical of a population. For instance, in San Francisco, Black Americans represent 5% of the population, but 38% of those experiencing homelessness because of gentrification, because of the high increases and the lack of wealth building. You will see this in nearly every community in the country because of this historical legal practices to discriminate against our community members. So we see again that the history of the four different things, the wages, the job, the housing costs, the safety net, deinstitutionalization overlaid with racism, because of the historical covenants. All right, next issues. Most people experiencing homelessness, they want to be homeless. How many have heard that? And I try not to roll my eyes at this, but but this is the most ridiculous statement. I've heard elected officials in this city say this, none of whom are in this room, that have ever said something poorly about our people that need help the most. But folks experiencing homelessness, they want to be housed. It is demoralizing. It is without dignity to live outside. Now, if you, random person, come up to someone and say, hey, you want to be inside? God knows what they'll say to you, right? Because they don't know you. They haven't built a relationship with you, right? But we can tell you as service providers, as all the data shows, that nearly everyone who is homeless wants to actually have a home of their own. They might say no to shelter because it's hard to live in community, particularly in congregate settings. So, living in sort of dorm settings with 50, 60, 70, 100, 200 other people, that is hard, and people have had experiences. Shoot, my husband won't go to a restaurant twice if he's had a bad experience. Like, imagine going to a place where you're taking your family or where you're taking your belongings. And there's all sorts of reasons that people don't go into shelter. Some shelters don't allow pets. And people on the streets have a lot of pets because that's their family, and there's safety in that as well. So, what are we doing as a system to help people come inside? And shelter is not the only solution. And there's lots of reasons that people say no to shelter, but they don't say no to housing. There's no data that shows that people say no to housing. I will say that sometimes folks who are having an acute psychiatric episode, who are not connecting with reality in that moment, sometimes it's harder to get to them, and really we have assertive engagement methods to really connect with them when there's moments of lucidity so that they can think for themselves and actually say yes to housing. So there are a few folks that are just so, acutely unwell that it's hard to connect with them. But that's not because they're choosing to be outside. Another one of my favorites I've already mentioned. Oh, it's too expensive. How many have heard it costs over $1 million a unit to create housing in the Bay Area, and we're never going to be able to build ourselves out of it? It's too expensive. Well, it's expensive because all of us, frankly. So we, the supply and demand is a real thing. And, the fact that it is hard to build in certain places. So you actually see some evidence of more successful building in other places that are cheaper, right? But this is a sort of a cross between our morals, and I guess just our morals, right? So cost of housing is so expensive here, because land is expensive, because we believe in labor agreements. So we believe in high wages. We believe in environmental excellence. So all of these things make housing more expensive. And we've created systems, too, that makes it really hard to build housing, right? So the longer it takes to build housing, the more expensive it is, just because costs go up year over year over year. But I can tell you that it is way cheaper to house someone than to leave them unhoused, because there's all sorts of hidden costs, that we're paying in the justice system, in the health and hospital system, and other social services when people are unhoused that just aren't there, or they're at much lower cost once someone's housed. So we are literally paying to keep people unhoused. It is cheaper to house them. So typically, many studies have shown that if you look at the folks who are housing and in permanent housing, it costs communities $40,000 to $100,000, really $60,000 to $100,000 a year to keep them unhoused, psychiatric stays. emergency rooms, all of these really high-cost systems, jails. And to get them in housing, we're talking, depending on the type of housing, $15,000 to $40,000 a year. Yes, it is money, but we're paying it to keep them unhoused and unwell, not only them, but our communities, because we're all less well when we have people outside living. So it is expensive. And on the right-hand side, this is a little bit of an older graph, but there are all sorts of benefits to being homeowners, that more benefits go to homeowners that make $100,000 and $200,000 than they do to lower income individuals. So this idea that that we don't want to give things for free, like homeowners get things for free all the time. So, you know, we forget that the mortgage tax deduction is, you know, a lightning rod. Like there's no way that anyone can touch that, because, you know, if you look in our government, that there are very few renters and a lot of homeowners. I can go in a whole hour about that. I'll go quick. So lots of homeless individuals are not here, not from our community. This is a favorite as well. I can tell you people are not coming to Fremont for services. They're not coming to Fremont for housing. Data from our local data, from our regional, state, national data, people stay where they're from. So 85 to 95% of the folks really are from this community. And they, yes, that, you know, we have border lines and they might go from one city to the next, but really people come back to their community. So this is absolutely false. No one believes us, but there's, you know, data after data after data, because someone runs into someone and say, where are you from? They say, I'm from Idaho. And then a politician says, see, everyone's coming to Fremont. And it's just not true. Many homelessness are individuals who propose danger to society. This is false. Actually, if you're homeless, you are more likely to be a victim of crime than a perpetrator of one. They're just as likely as any homeowner. Housing programs are ineffective unless they mandate services and treatment. I talked a little bit about housing first, but there is study after study that shows treatment first programs are actually less effective. So because there are programs that require sobriety and treatment and all of the things, half as effective, not even like by percentage, they are half as effective as housing first programs, because housing first programs put the responsibility, you know, that gives the dignity back to the person so that they can make choices for themselves, right? So, and they're more, you know, don't we all do better when we're making a choice for ourselves rather than they're being told to do something? We all do better there. Line. All right, so this is the call to action piece. And I'm now over time, I think, so I'm gonna go so then I can answer questions. So I've summed it up very globally. Be nice. And I mean, this sounds like a little thing, but it's a huge thing. Say hi to people, smile at people, see people. Like most people who are homeless are sort of invisible. So just be nice and don't assume the worst. Like I've had my really bad days. I'd hate to be judged on those bad days. So be nice and encourage your friends, family, community members to be nice. Simple things. You don't have to be wealthy to be nice. Be smart. So read, educate yourself and others, make common sense statements, use stories. You know, really, you know, when you're talking to someone who says something silly like, oh, people want to be homeless, or they're coming from other places, you actually have the opportunity to engage with them, you know, as a person that they trust, rather than me, who they think I'm an interested party and I just, you know, care about my agency. You know, you as a community member have a lot more sway with people and helping them understand person to person, changing the narrative around housing and homelessness. Be generous with your time and your money, because people are in different circumstances. You know, Abode has volunteer opportunities. You, of course, can donate, but there's lots of other organizations, Tri-City Volunteers, SAVE. There's many organizations in this community and beyond who are doing the hard work, helping people. I encourage you to find the one or the ones that most connect with what you believe in and your passion and your time and financial capabilities, and go with that, right? That, you know, that's really meaningful, particularly in light of this federal administration, that I think we're all going to need a little help, more help than we even have in the past. So be generous and be bold. So this is what the League is great at. So I use the League all of the time in our work to get the vote out and whatnot. Support legislation and policies. Right now, there's a Senate bill, gosh, I think it's 693 by Perez, that is an anti-criminalization bill. It's sort of gutted in committee. It was like you can't fine, cite, or jail folks. Now it's only you can't fight, sign, or jail helpers of folks. But still, you know, incremental progress. We all know that that's how laws are made. So I can get you more information on that. I talked a little bit about the budget that came out. There's going to be lots of opportunity to lobby our lawmakers to make sure that housing and services in our community stays as whole as we can possibly make it. Put good candidates forward, right? And really, really look at your candidates and see who's voting for what and why. And think about other folks, you know, who might really understand, you know, and support your values in a different way. Use your own social media and build bridges whenever possible. I really say that, you know, and actually there's evidence to show that we're split up in quarters, really, that there are the 25% of people like me, many of you, because I know many of you in this room, that are believers. We know that housing is the solution. We know that services are important. We care about our communities in deep ways. They're believers. There's a 25% who think, pull yourself up by your bootstrap, you gotta work, you know, it's all about the individual factors, you know, those folks we're not gonna convince. But there's a 50% in the middle who are really swayed by this idea as, wow, $1 million is a lot, that's really expensive. You know, that those folks are the ones that we should be talking to, that we shouldn't only be talking to ourselves, you know, that are the true believers, because there's 50% in the middle that really, with a little more understanding and education and patience, that we can actually, you know, convince that housing is a real solution to homelessness. So that's what I mean by build bridges. A few resources, again, I'll send this out. Fantastic books, some are older, some are newer, and they're not exhaustive, right? They're, you know, I was talking to a gentleman around Kevin Fagan, who's a reporter in the Bay Area, just, I guess last year published a book that's supposed to be amazing. I haven't read that one yet. This Greg Colburn book is great. Housing is a homeless problem, also Bay Area focused. Color of Law is an older book that really talks about racism and all of the legal practices that we put in place that have kept people out of the housing market. And this last one is the study that I cited a lot, that is from UCSF, the 3,200 folks that were surveyed, and that's accessible online for free. Thank you, that's it. And I can be reached, and I am pretty accessible. Some of you have already reached out. I'm happy to have talks, meetings. Again, I find that part of my job, you know, that the part that I love the most actually is this sort of thing, educating, talking about the reality of housing and homelessness. So I'm really happy to have individual conversations with you or your groups, or answer questions as well. And you can reach me at any of these places.
So Vivian will take some more questions, and we have Andrea with a microphone so that you can be heard. Would anybody like to ask her some more questions? Oh, over here.
Most of us already know about the ordinance criminalizing the unhoused with the camping ban. I would like to know the current status for Abode, if you're still paused services here in Fremont, besides ways for us to cooperate together in light of that and after those problems, I'd like to cooperate. I've also been doing direct aid to the unhoused and learning about the encampments and different situations. So yeah, here for Fremont for Everyone, we've been doing our aiding and abetting.
So thank you, Kate. So yes, we are also aiding and abetting. So we have not paused our services. The city was able to generate a letter for us from the city manager's office and not from the attorney's office. But that alongside the actual change in the ordinance allowing goods, because this was our worry that we hand out tents and sleeping bags all of the time. But because of that, we went back to our attorney and, they said it's going to be as safe as it's going to be. And so, yes, we are providing services. We're also keeping an eye on Fremont, right? So what police are doing, what the sweeps are looking at like. And thus far, we haven't heard of any acceleration yet, but we are, we are watching.
I agree with the Fremont homeless plan, but what is the solution for all of the people who are camping, who do not fit into that plan? To me, that is probably one of the most visible political hot buttons there is.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of solutions to that. They do cost money, to be clear. So, I mean, a lot of folks in this room are working on expanding safe parking. That's just a place where they don't have to be fearful of getting arrested or getting their and right now it's only cars, but cars and RVs towed. But essentially, we need places for people to be until we have enough housing for them where they're not in fear. So, good. Yeah, I think it's actually, going to our elected leaders and calling, for it and saying, hey, we actually want the resources. Freaks me out, me being upscreen. Who is that? We need the resources because they heard a lot from us, from folks who were against the ban, frankly. But I think now is the time to pivot to say, okay, the ban has happened. There's fighting on the ban that's happening separately. I might get a question on that. But let's talk about those solutions that you keep holding up, right? Let's fund those solutions because we do have as you know, there's a group actually meeting to activate those solutions. And it's gonna need goodwill from the electeds, not only sound bites from them. I can't speak to that. I'm not with the city, but I don't know if anyone here can, but I'm not sure.
So Vivian, this is kind of related to that. The ordinance that was passed and then changed, taking the aiding and abetting out. Aiding and abetting is still part of the municipal code, so technically you could still be held legally accountable. Could you talk to the constitutionality aspect of criminalizing homelessness? Not only the constitutional right of an individual, but and you've touched on this, by criminalizing homelessness, we're going to increase homelessness.
Yeah, so I am not an attorney, but from my standpoint, whenever you make it easier to cite, fine, or arrest a certain type of individual, a certain situation, from my standpoint, that is, again, not an attorney, not the essence who we are as Americans. That's, this sort of like innocent until proven guilty thing that we have. Like, it seems like it's gone to the wayside here, right? In Fremont, they continually persist, so they just need it as a tool to get people to move, right? You know, which again is a whole issue, like where are they going to move to, right? There's not enough shelter. But from my standpoint, anytime you, again, yeah, I use the example of, look, you know, whenever I was talking to electeds and folks who are pro-ban, everyone would give me this, an example of a dog, you know, a dog of a person experiencing homelessness bit someone that they know. It was sort of like an old wives' tale. Like, I heard about this dog biting someone, I don't know how many times. So, you know, and I said, well, okay, you know, that is a crime. Like, you know, if my dog got out, I don't have a dog, I have cats. But anyway, if anyone's dog got out, I would expect to be accountable for that dog bite, right? You know, but I wouldn't say all people who own dogs should be more, you should be able to arrest, cite, and find them more easily because of that dog bite. But that's what we've done with people experiencing homelessness. So, I mean, it is in court right now, as many of you know. We will see. Abode is not party to the lawsuit, but there are some other groups that are in this community, and I'm optimistic that the court will agree that it's not constitutional. But again, I'm not an attorney. I think it's awful, frankly, and akin to a lot of what the federal administration is doing and targeting certain types of people.
Hello.
Hi.
First of all, thank you for what you do. It's very impressive. One of the most impressive homeless aid programs I've ever heard of. So thank you for what you do. And I was just wondering, what's your funding source for Abode? Where do you get your
Government
funds?
So
Government? Okay.
So we're about 96% government funded at all levels. So we have local, city, county, state, federal dollars. We have what's called like categorical funding. So we get money from Santa Clara County to fund efforts in Santa Clara County, money in Fremont to serve Fremont households. You know, so we have 175 different contracts, you know, that we manage in any given year. And then we actually raise money as well to provide for the gaps, to provide for the things like this that no like individual funding source wants to pay for, to grow in other communities. So really, we assertively try to meet our mission. For those of you who are here at the very beginning, I, in my heart of hearts, like care deeply about all of the people in our care, the 17,000 people that we serve every year, but it's painful to me, all the people we can't get to. So it's my job to get to as many people as we can get to, because until I see homelessness decreasing in our communities, and I mean our global communities in the Greater Bay Area beyond Fremont, and where then we can take a breather and like do less. Until then, I'm going to try to serve as many people as I can every single year in as many communities as I can. So that the donations help us do that, help us really help other communities and this community solve new problems. Reshma?
Oh, hi, Vivian. Thank you
Hi.
so much for this wonderful presentation. I wish we could send it out to more people. What are some of the things, I know you had, what sort of an action slides.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically here in Fremont, I know the budget cycle is now, budget's about to be approved. Two things. One is, what can we immediately advocate for? And two, I'm wondering about intermediate solutions. Because for people in living in a tent, is there any way to help them in some way before we can build actual housing?
Yeah, so immediate solutions, I really think we need to call upon Fremont to have certain spaces where they will not actually cite, fine, arrest people, right? So, because It's literally illegal to be homeless anywhere in Fremont, right? So how do you do that? Like we have 900 people who are experiencing homelessness. You know, where do people go, right? They're not going to Milpitas. They're not going to Union City and Newark. You know, like they're staying here. So instead of this whack-a-mole, we need a place that folks can go. I'm not a huge fan and sort of sanction encampments and that sort of thing. However, when you make it illegal for people to breathe and sleep, you know, that's a problem. So that's one thing that we need to advocate for, that there's city-owned land, there's places that could do it, and it's going to create it's going to require a lot of political will, because, you know, for any, y'all were around for the Navigation Center Fund? Yeah, and I'm sure many of you here, like it's, you know, people have feelings about homeless programs anywhere close to them. So I think that's one thing. You know, the other thing is, like, you know, to your point here, be watchful of the budget. Let's see where money is going. Ask critical questions. You know, do public records requests. Do that sort of thing to actually make sure that money is going towards the homeless response plan and not only towards enforcement. I think those are the two, like, actionable things as Fremont citizens that you can do right now.
Thank you.
How you doing?
Hi.
I didn't really have a question. I just had like a statement. I'm a product of the Housing First. You know what you guys do. I started off 6 years ago in Sunrise Village, homeless with a 2-month-old child and a fiance, and went into an Abode property where I stay today. And currently I'm an employee of Abode.
Excellent.
I just started a few weeks ago, but I just wanted to say thank you and thank Abode for the opportunity, because it did take me to be able to get into a place to where I could get my dignity back. I had lost it in addiction. I wasn't homeless because of my addiction. It was a choice that I had made. I didn't want to, you know, but that's another story. But being proof that Housing First does help, and then services on the way. Like I said, I'm a prime testament that they do have services that are within the Abode properties that they have their name on. There is services that help you throughout the time. They've serviced me and my wife now, my child, who's 7 years old, and yeah, it works. So I just want to say
Great. Well,
thank you guys.
thank you for being here, and thank you for your testimony. And I swear we didn't plant him. We didn't know, but thank you. Iris?
So one of the things that I noticed in the pyramid slide is
The pyramid that's not the stair.
It seems like one of the things I hear is there's often a debate about should we spend our money on temporary shelter or should we spend our money on permanent housing. My response is usually we need both. And I'm wondering if you've got any study information that shows the balance that actually seems to be working in communities like Fremont or like the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm. So there's what we call system modeling in every community, and it sort of takes the resources that we have. It shows how many people are flowing into the system, right? How many people are becoming homeless, and how many people are sort of achieving, you know, housing, right? So it does look a little bit different in every community. A few years ago, All Home, which is sort of a regional convener in the Bay Area, created the 1-2-4 plan. So for simplicity, I really like this. It's not exactly right in every community, but what it basically says is for every short-term housing solution, so shelter, interim housing, you know, that sort of thing, you need 2 permanent solutions, because again, people can't stay there. Like, you need to have flow, and to be able to continue to serve people, folks need someplace permanent to go. So for every 1 interim setting, you need 2 permanent settings and 4 prevention settings, right? So, and again, they're not all created equal. It's not dollar for dollar. As you can imagine, preventing someone from becoming homeless is far cheaper than actually permanent housing. Ironically enough, interim housing is usually way more expensive. So maybe not building it, but the ongoing operations, because interim housing usually is 24/7, right? Whereas permanent housing, You have a unit, you close the door, we provide services. It's like any apartment building, but interim housing is really expensive. So, it really depends on the resource that goes along with it. But 1, 2, 4 is how I think about it. But yes, that's the right answer. And we don't want to pit people against each other. Yes, we need more shelter, guys. We have a little over 100 beds in Fremont. We need more. But we can't only stop at shelter, because if we only stop at shelter, there'll never be enough, right? Housing takes a while, so we have to start now, hard, fast. And we need places for people to go now too. So it can't be this simple dichotomy, right? So 1, 2, 4 is how I like to think about it.
You can do a couple of tiny little things in your own little groups. All of you here today can talk to your own congregations, your church congregations, and encourage them to step up and be one of the churches that provides safe parking. That would be wonderful. Another thing you can do when you come to League of Women Voters meeting is notice that there's a tiny little beat up pantry outside the front door. And you could aid and abet by putting a can of something non-perishable in there for a homeless person to pick up and eat. Thank you.
Yes, I love my colleague Jen, who's the CEO of Save. She had a great idea of having aiding a bedathon. So let's all come on aid and abet all together. So I love that.
Yeah. Hello. Years ago, I used to work down at Brown Road, which was a very enlightening experience.
Otherwise known as Sunrise Village, but many
Sunrise
people
Village.
still
Brown.
refer to it
Yeah.
as Brown.
More lately, I've heard an urban rumor, which I hope is false, that might close, that it was taking too much money to help too few people.
That's not true. Last year and the year before, Sunrise Village doesn't get enough funding from local, meaning Fremont and the county. So we had to do some hard lobbying with the county. We were losing $400,000 to $500,000 a year on keeping it open, and that's not sustainable for our organization. So in that, we talked to a lot of elected officials. The city stepped up, the county stepped up to more fully fund. Just to give you an idea, we receive about $150,000 for the Sunrise Village and have for the past 20 years. It costs about $1.5 million to run that annually because it's a 24/7 building, and we believe in 3 meals a day, 365 days a year, and we believe in treating people with dignity and upkeep and all of that. So we need to do some advocacy, but no, we do not intend on closing it. If it reduces in funding and we can't fund it, that's a whole nother thing, because then we can't serve people like they deserve to be served. But I see no signs of that. The county has agreed to continue to fund it at higher levels. The county funds it, I think, at $36 a night, right? So imagine $150,000 and $36 a night for 66 people at any point in time. But no, we will be keeping that open, assuming that the funding stays sufficient to do so. And we already also provide individual funding in there too.
How are they going to afford to pay for it?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'll repeat the question just in case people didn't hear it. Once there's housing, how do people pay for it? So this is the big challenge in building affordable housing, right? In the housing that we build, there's really 3 buckets of money that we need to actually build the housing. One is the capital dollars, right? To build the bricks and mortar, the structure. The second part is the operations dollars. So this is the subsidies in it to actually support the difference of what a typical market rate rent would be with what people can pay, right? So if I'm trying to build housing for people experiencing homelessness, they're not going to be able to afford market rate rent, right? So I need to make up that difference. They might be able to afford $100, $300, $400. So the subsidy, usually through a housing authority project-based Section 8, voucher makes up the difference between what they can pay and what the rent would need to be to operate the building. And then the third bucket is services, right? How to actually pay for services to make sure that it's not housing only, that to make sure that I have the on-site services embedded in that building to ensure that folks get what they need when they need it. So those three have to work in partnership. And it's challenging because any failing of one of those three, so right now in the federal budget, if Medicaid is cut, that's partially what funds services. If housing authority vouchers are cut, that's what funds the operating. And then there's other capital dollars as well that are already scarce right now. So other things that you can do is when ballot measures come up to raise money for housing, vote yes. Because absent of that, it's really hard to build in this community. But there's always that subsidy. And I can talk, there's a whole nother presentation too on how to build affordable housing. But yes, we don't have people move in to units that they can't afford.
I'd like to know what your opinion is on tiny houses that are being built in like areas in San Jose. The little tiny structures.
Yeah, no, tiny homes is a thing. It depends. Again, like I think we need it all, right? Tiny homes typically don't give you the density that you need, right? It's, so it's still spread out. Like we need density. We need more housing on less land, right? So it doesn't really meet that. A lot of times tiny homes are, they're not all created equally. Sometimes they don't have their own bathrooms or kitchens, and that's a problem, right? People deserve to have their own bathrooms and kitchens, right? But sometimes it's for temporary housing, sometimes it's for permanent housing. So again, to Iris's question, I live in an and world. I think we need it all. So if I've heard of churches being able to build tiny homes, on part of their land, and that's feasible for them. They don't want to do a dense thing, so if they can build 15 units, great. ADUs, so accessory dwelling units in the back of, our homes, great, right? The little increments is going to get us there, but we still need density. So it's not going to all be solved in tiny homes. The other thing that I'll say, and this has been a learning for us, is even as we've built housing, there's this cross between density and livability, right? So we've built housing that has really, really small units, and we find that people don't want to live in really, really small units. I mean, this is sort of a common sense thing, right? But from a mission standpoint, gosh, I could build 150 units there that are really small, or 80 that are more livable. It's a trade-off, right? Do you build one over the other? But people tend to stay longer if they're in more comfortable settings. So there's this like push and pull that we're always working on. But again, it's going to be right for someone, but might not be right for everyone. Is that it? Oh, we're on time. I want to thank everyone. I see so many friends in the audience, but I am available. We'll send the contact information.
Vivian, we want to thank you.
That's so nice.
And we appreciate all of the information, resources, ideas, and to be smart, to be bold, and to be nice. I like that. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone for coming. We appreciate your time on this Saturday morning, and we hope that you pass by our table outside. There's information about Abode, as well as information about our league and ways to donate. We appreciate that. We do have our annual membership meeting coming up June 28th at Acacia Creek, and we invite you to attend that. We have invited Dr. Senator Aisha Wahab to be our presenter. So thank you again. Take care.